Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Let's get nice and quiet because Rabbi Sari and I have prepared a lecture for you with an accompanying PowerPoint presentation, and there will be a quiz at the end.
It's true.
I'm kidding. It's not a test. But instead, we're going to share a story. And Rabbi Sari, why did you choose this story? Because it's a beautiful story. And I was trying to figure out, what does this story have to do with what's going on in the Jewish calendar? Listen carefully. This will provide context.
Okay, part one is that I couldn't tell the story I told this morning because we had too many parents who were also third grade parents. So I was like,
needed a second story. Okay.
So that was number one. But number two is we happen to have a holiday coming up that I think our third graders and our second graders and our first grade, everyone knows. Can anyone tell me? Purim, I heard it somewhere over there. Oh, was that you, Nikki? Nikki reminded us that Purim is coming up. And one of the things that we do for Purim, in addition to our carnival and hearing the Megillah and making mishloach manot and matanat le'evyonim, giving gifts to people who are close to us and also to people who maybe don't have as much as we do. The other thing that we do is we dress up in costumes. And here's the thing about costumes and about the story of Purim, and it's why I picked this story, is that the interesting thing about Purim is Esther spends the first half of the story trying to hide who she really is. So she actually puts on all these different costumes, the royal garb and the fancy crown, and tries to hide who she is. But the second part of the story, the important part of the story, where all the action happens, is actually where Esther really admits and owns who she really is. And so here is a story about a different Esther, an Esty.
So there's like concealing and revealing.
Amazing.
And figuring out who we are. Now I understand the context, and we are going to share this story with you. We hope that it will elevate your Shabbat and your celebration of Purim. Don't forget, the carnival is on Sunday, and the adult Purim celebration is Monday night. Once upon a time, there was a mother eagle who was so proud of the 2 eggs that lay in her nest. Even before they hatched, she already loved them. When the egg on the right hatched and her first baby peeped its first peep, which sounded like this, she quickly rushed off to bring this one food to eat. She never wanted him to suffer, even for the briefest of moments. And only moments after she flew off to get him food, the little egg on the left began to jump and bump, and the left egg was hatching. The egg jumped again and began to roll out of the nest. It fell through the air. Perhaps this was the end.
But no! A farmer was driving back from town and happened to be driving right under the tree at the moment the egg fell out of the nest. And so it landed safely and softly in the hay in the back of the farmer's truck. And off this egg traveled, completely unaware of what was happening, all the way to the farm. And so this story is about that little egg on the left.
At the farm, the farmer asked his young son to help unload the bales of hay. And the boy saw the egg, and he picked it up to examine it, and he could feel it moving. He could hear the pecking inside. He quickly brought it over to the chicken coop, hoping that these birds would know what to do with it.
And so, as eggs do, the egg hatched. And the bird that emerged was certainly the weirdest looking chicken that boy had ever seen. This chicken was the weirdest chicken that the chickens had ever seen. No one really knew what to do with this strange looking creature, and so they raised the egg on the left just as they would any other chicken, and they named her Esty.
Now, Esty did her best to fit in with the other birds, but it was hard because she didn't look like her friends. She learned to peck the ground, and she made quiet clucking sounds, and she would bob her head when she walked, but none of this came naturally to her. From time to time, she would look up into the heavens, and she would dream of flying. She would dream of adventure, but chickens don't fly. And the life of a chicken is very predictable.
But one day, Esty heard a rooster crowing. And she thought, maybe I could do that too. That seems special. And so she opened her mouth to crow as loud as she could. And what came out was not a crow, but was a deafening screech. And everyone ran away from her because they were scared. And so Esty learned that the best way for her to fit in was to keep her head down, to keep her feet on the ground, and to keep her voice as small as possible.
Now, as Esty grew up, so did her brother, that egg that was on the right-hand side of the nest. And he learned from his mother how to fly, how to soar, how to distinguish things on the ground from miles up in the air. He learned to fly fast and gracefully and to be able to spot prey from a tremendous distance. But what he loved most about being an eagle was exploring. And so he would often go out for hours at a time just looking for adventure.
And it was on one of these adventures that he happened to look down and see the strangest thing. There on a small farm, he saw chickens bobbing their heads and eating grain. But amongst them, he thought he saw an eagle. And so he swooped down to get a better look. What is going on here, he thought. That is definitely an eagle. And yet there she walks with her head down, never looking up, eating grain. How strange.
Excuse me, he said to Esty, having no idea he was talking to his own sister. Excuse me, but what are you doing here?
And Esty, in the smallest of voices, said, I'm eating grain. I'm bobbing my head. I'm pawing to myself. What else would a chicken do?
A chicken? Replied her brother in alarm. You're not a chicken. You're an eagle. You were meant to fly, to soar. This life is fine for chickens, but you were not meant to eat grain from a farmer. You're supposed to hunt. You're not meant to speak softly and cluck. Your call is supposed to echo across the mountaintops. Ooh! Ooh! Can't you see who you are?
But she couldn't. She couldn't imagine she was as special as this stranger thought she was. So she ignored him and went back to her coop to be alone. And the eagle flew home and told his mother of this eagle, who seemed to think that she was a chicken. Esty fell asleep in the coop and had a dream. And the words of that weird eagle stranger must have made an impression, because that night she dreamed she was soaring through the sky, diving from great heights and spreading her wings wide with her head held high. When she awoke in the morning, she tried to forget her dream. She went out amongst all her fellow chickens, began to bob her head, and began to walk and eat grain from the ground.
And then she saw two large shadows. She looked up to find the stranger from yesterday with another beautiful bird. She didn't know that she was looking at her own mother. They came and landed right beside her.
Please leave me alone, asked Esty. Her mother studied her and said, Have you always been a chicken? Yes, said Esty. And her mother asked, Well, have you ever done anything that seemed out of the ordinary? Well, Esty was embarrassed, but reluctantly she admitted, My voice is very screechy. It's very embarrassing. And I'm too big. I feel really out of place here. And her mother looked at her and said, Well, but what if I told you that those parts of you that you find embarrassing are the most beautiful parts of you? They make you who you are. Oh, well, I wouldn't believe you, Esty replied. Her mother said, If only you could see yourself through our eyes, you would see how special you are. But Esty still wasn't sure. I'm not special, not like you guys. I'm just a chicken. Just leave me alone.
So then her brother said, We will if you just do this one thing with us. Come with us and fly.
I can't fly. Chickens can't fly.
Well then, you won't get off the ground and we'll leave you alone.
Okay.
And so I'm going to just tell you, spread your wings. And she spread her wings. And it felt so good, so natural. And then her brother said, now stretch out your neck. And she did. And Esty raised her head and stood proudly. And she looked up and she took her eyes off the ground and she looked to the sky and she wanted more than anything to be up there.
Now they said, flap your wings, and she did. And Esty found her feet leaving the ground, and she found herself raising higher and higher. And she was so scared, but she was also so happy. Her dream was coming true.
She had never been a chicken. Chickens are wonderful, and she loved them dearly. And she tried to change herself so she could fit in. And she felt bad about who she was. But now as she soared higher and higher and looked down on the farm that was a speck on the ground and saw beautiful flowers in the valley and the snowy whiteness of the mountaintops, now that she wasn't trying to deny any part of herself, she felt free. She felt whole. And for the first time in her entire life, she felt like herself.